I've seen people in the email marketing space, they'll say once someone joins your email list that you can't, for the first 50 days, don't make any offers. It's just all nurture, nurture, nurture. And I go the other way. So all my daily emails, day one, when someone joins my list, there's an invitation to invest in one of my programs, one of my products, get my help.
Our ever-changing world calls upon the most courageous, resilient, and relentless of us to face its most extraordinary challenges. To help you embark on this journey, we present the Impactful Coaching Podcast, your oasis for inspiration and a beacon to spark the fires of greatness within you. I'm Joseph. I will be your ally in this journey to empower your potential. Join us each week as we dive deep into the heart of ambition, drive, and success to unravel compelling stories of daring leaders who dreamed, struggled, and achieved victory. Our journey begins now. How is everybody doing? My name is Joseph, and we are back. Unless this is your first time listening, which is all I have to say for that is welcome. Thanks for joining us on the Impactful Coaching Podcast. I am here with, I don't know exactly what word I think is the most accurate because I don't want to like oversell it or undersell it, but definitely like a true figurehead in the coaching space. I don't know if you want to go with icon or legend or anything along those lines, but I was really impressed just to see how much of a influence and an impact that you have in the coaching space. And so it really is an honor and a privilege to have you here. Marc and Mawhinney, how are you doing today? How are you feeling?
I'm good. I've never been called an icon before, so I won't argue.
Technically, you haven't been called it yet because that was one of the ones that I was going through my mind. But so I guess I'll start off with, because this is what's been running through my mind now, just for the audience and for the people who are going to be listening to this on your side, is my background and my experiences in media. I've been in media and podcasting for 10 years, but I'm very new to the coaching space. And so I really didn't have a grasp for just what the scale of the coaching world is. And I got a glimpse of it when I was reading through your offers, your JV page, about how you have an engagement of over 100,000 coaches. And I very nearly poured myself a drink after that because I don't have a true grasp of the scale of it. So with your experience, before we get into the backstory and what you do so that we can share that side with my audience, how well could you quantify the scale of the coaching industry as it is today?
It's funny because where I'm in it every day and talking with a lot of coaches and, working in this business, I assume that it's that everybody's a coach or knows the coach. You're in that bubble. Then I have to remind myself when I speak with friends who are not in the online space, or I have older family members that have no clue what a podcast is or coach or whatever. I'm like, oh no, it has room to grow for sure. So I will say that I've been doing it since 2014 and doing it every day. So I feel like everybody's a coach or knows what it is. And I guess that's not the case. It still has a lot of room to grow.
I think that there is a somewhat of a distinction, because when we think of coaches in the classic sense, we think of like coaches for a soccer team or largely in the sporting space. And I mean, I think law of averages, sooner or later, I'll talk to somebody along those lines. But have you had a chance to talk to anybody who maybe adheres more to like the classic definition of someone who coaches soccer teams or works with large groups along those lines?
Well, it's interesting. I'm single at the moment, so I'm in the dating space. And a lot of the women I talk with assume when I say coach, they're, oh, what sport? And then I have to explain what a coach is. And I've done that more than once for sure. Before I got into coaching, I didn't know much about it because I spent 10 years in real estate back in the first decade of the 2000s. And I was approached once by a business coach, and that was kind of news to me. I'm like, oh, gee, I was thinking sports with coaching and stuff. And I think that was around 06 that he came into my office or whatever. And that was a long time ago when it wasn't quite as well known with it. So it's interesting for my podcast. I've interviewed a lot of coaches because it's a show for that. And I've actually interviewed some people who do coaching that intersects with what we're talking about and sports coaching type things. I had a coach on that's like a coach for athletes. He helps a lot of golfers that get like into a slump, or, baseball players that get the yips and they suddenly can't throw from second base to first base, or if they're catcher, they can't throw back to mound. There's something in their head. So it's interesting. I've kind of seen it all here over the last 10 years.
I wrote this one down, and I just want to be very clear that I wrote this down just because for the fun of it. But we have professionals who are the ones being coached typically, and then you have people whose role is to coach the coaches. Are there also people who coach the people who coach the people who coach the people? And if so, what part of the airplane do they typically fly in?
Yeah, it's like Inception. Coach who coaches coaches who coaches coaches or whatever. It's kind of like a running joke, I guess, in the online space. All kidding aside, I guess for lack of better term, I work specifically with coaches. So you could say, I'm coach who coaches coaches, and but I do think everybody needs a coach. And anytime I'm working with usually one or two on something specific, it could be writing a book. It could be a coach helping me with something else. I hired a health coach not too long ago as well on that end as well. But yeah, it's an interesting world, and you have to differentiate between people who are genuinely helping people and then the marketers, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
problem, because there's some marketers that are excellent at what they do. You think they're amazing, then you peek beyond the curtains, there's not much there. The flip side of it is there's amazing coaches who are bad marketers. They just can't get the clients. If they could, they would do amazing with them, but they're just not good at selling their services. And unfortunately, if I had to put my money between a great marketer and who's a mediocre coach, or an amazing coach who's a mediocre marketer, I'm going to put my money probably on the marketer to do better, just because that's how it works in this
Mm-hmm.
world.
I've seen this come up in different industries. Some of my experience ties into, say, like the gaming industry and the entertainment industry, and I would even say the food industry. I like to use McDonald's as this example, where the McDonald's products, they're not the best burgers. They're okay. I like them, but there's definitely much better products out there. But what McDonald's has, of course, is that brand recognition, and they have the marketing machine behind them. So I've always looked at the best marketers as the people who generate the interest and to expand the market, whereas the people who are much more developed in their technique and offer a much better product, they don't have the bandwidth to also do that level of marketing, but because maybe they don't need to. Because once you have a market to appeal to, you can start to niche down, and then you can find more people along those lines. So that's where I feel like it's probably the equivalency here. But would you agree, and would you say there's any variance in how this model would work in the space?
It's like subs too. Like Subway doesn't have the best subs. I used to eat a lot of it back in high school. I feel like the quality's gone downhill, at least here on the east coast of Canada. I'm not sure if Ontario's the same. So I have a local sub shop I love. I go there. Subway, I'll grab it in a pinch, but not my
Mm-hmm.
favorite. That's interesting. I don't know if I've thought of it that way. I guess the way in a way, I would look at the Tony Robbins, Brendan Burchard type heavy hitters that you see out there spending a lot of money getting all these people onto webinars and exposing them to personal development does trickle down to help the other coaches who just don't have the kind of budgets that they have. And that's why when people bash Tony Robbins, I like some of his stuff back in the day. I used to follow it. I'm not as big following his stuff now, but we do owe a debt to people like him to open people's eyes up for it. It's kind of like professional wrestling. A lot of people crap on Hulk Hogan for different reasons. He used to, with politics, hold down a lot of other wrestlers, and he had the ego, and he's maybe had some issues with the truth and stuff. But even the ones that hate Hulk Hogan, there's a lot of them. Those wrestlers will admit that, yeah, the whole reason wrestling became what it was because of Hulkamania, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think we do owe a debt to some of those bigger players. And the way that I look at it in terms of competing with them, by the way, because a client of mine said this the other day, I had an issue where she had shut down her previous business basically because she didn't feel she could compete with a big guy in her space. And she's like, can I compete with all that money they're spending on ads and the results and everything else? And I said, you have to view it kind of like a small town hardware store. If Home Depot's coming into town, they may
Mm-hmm.
feel the same way. But you compete with them by providing it per customer. And I've read this story before with mom and pop hardware store that competed with Home Depot and drove them out of business. Ironically, they hired people who were very knowledgeable about home stuff versus Home Depot would hire kids, and then good luck trying to flag anyone down in the store. It's like you have to tackle someone to get help. So they had knowledgeable retired men who retired but were bored and knew a ton about that stuff. They gave amazing customer service, very knowledgeable, and people would then go to the mom and pop instead of going to the Home Depot, even though they could get lower prices. And it's the same way competing with the big guns in the coaching world. Good luck if you're buy one of Tony Robbins' programs speaking with Tony directly. It's not going to happen. But you or I, people can get that engagement if they purchase our program and invest in it. So that's the way I look at it.
And I think it's important to point out that there is no person who could be completely without need of any kind of guidance whatsoever, even if it doesn't necessarily mean coaches, where it's counseling, therapy, which is a theme that does come up periodically on the program, as well as a lot of coaches dig into some of the deeper issues. I want to add a little bit more to this point, and then what I want to do is hear your story to our audience, just so that we can get the formal introduction into the ether here. So here in Toronto, I'm hesitant about how I shout things out, because I just want to make sure that I'm only doing it in a positive way. But I used to work for a theater store called Theatrics Plus, and they had a pretty significant challenge, because there's the Spirit Halloween store, which is a pop-up store that only shows up during Halloween. And I think there was an inherent advantage to Theatrics Plus, because they're available all year round, and they have a lot of connections to, well, theater and the more serious stuff that involves prosthetics, makeup remover, as well as Halloween costumes for the kids and for the family. So I think having that year-round service as well, it gives you the opportunity to appeal to people, so that when Halloween comes, they're the first people that come to your mind. And then, yes, Spirit Halloween does open up, but it's the same thing. They're there to continue to generate the interest in Halloween, but for all the other people who want something a little bit more specific, there has to be a place for them.
Have you seen the meme? It was from a few months ago when Bed Bath & Beyond declared bankruptcy and was shutting down. They had the meme with the guy behind the tree rubbing his hands. It's like Spirit of Halloween when they hear that Bed Bath & Beyond shutting down. Because, of course, what happens this time of year as we're recording is you see Spirit of Halloween taking over that empty space in the strip mall, wherever, and they're there for a month or a month or two, then they're replaced by a Christmas pop-up store or something else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that's a bad model either. If different businesses can show up at different times, Valentine's store, like a summer theme store, it's not a bad model. It's just, when we have the personal connections, we want to root for our local heroes as opposed to whoever happens to be coming in and leaving.
Yes.
Yeah. So with that, this part, I'm sure you've answered this 100 million times on the various podcasts that you've been a guest on, and I'm sure it's come up on yours, but my audience needs to hear it all the same. So would you let us know, how you would describe what you do and what got you to the position that you have today?
Yeah, I mean, it's always challenging because if you haven't already, I'm sure you're going to come across guests that give their whole life story, starting from birth to kindergarten into school, and their whole thing. So I always try to condense it. To make a really long story short, when I got out of university, I mentioned I was in real estate. I started in 2000. I spent about a decade through my 20s building up a big real estate business here on the East Coast. And then everything came collapsing down. So after about a decade of hockey stick growth, because we're both Canadians, so we have to say hockey stick growth, and no stumbles, just grow. It got to about 100 agents and employees. Everything imploded, and came crashing down. And I went through a period of a couple of years. I say I was in the wilderness, not literally, but it was some dark times, wondering what I want to do. And I decided I don't want to be doing real estate anymore, but what will be next with it? And I was helped back to my feet by a couple different coaches and mentors. So I got to see firsthand what coaching could do. And that's why when I decided to get back into business, I thought, this would be a great thing to do. It's super independent. You have a laptop, internet access. You can work with anyone all over the world. One of the things that bothered me with real estate is I felt like I was trapped in the local market, just chained here. And not to knock it, lots of people, enjoy real estate. It can be a great business career for people, but I was just feeling a little bit trapped in the local sandbox. And now my clients are in the States for the most part, but there's other ones around the world. And I really appreciate that. So that's how I got started in 2014. And my business has evolved and changed. It's really helping other coaches get more clients organically without paid ads. So the two things I don't enjoy doing, and a lot of coaches don't enjoy doing, is harassing people with cold messages. And I'm sure you've gotten a bunch of those in your Facebook, Instagram inboxes, or whatever. And I also teach them to get the clients without paid advertising as well. So they could do this organically. It's going to take some work, rolling up their sleeves and taking action, but they're not going to have to do those things to get the clients.
I understand that there has to be some need for it. I mean, our my producer, because the show was just starting up, we only had so much word of mouth, so we did have to send out quite a few emails just to start generating interest. So for us, it was a mix of like, let's do that. It's high volume, and we do get some response out of it, as you know, as we are sitting here in the evidence of that. But then as time goes on, and we can wean ourselves off of that because we're starting to build our network, and we can bring more people into the fold through referrals. So there is, we found a place for it, but I do agree that it's exhausting both to be the recipient of it. If you're a selected niche and you know that a lot of people are appealing to you, especially once you kind of suss it out and realize, oh, this is what people are doing. They're sending me a message that they send a message to a lot of other people. Likewise, it's exhausting to also send a lot of that too. So like, you know, between me and my producer, I try to make sure that I'm doing certain work, which is like I'm hosting the content, but I'm also editing the content, getting everything going because I know how to do all the back end stuff. Whereas uncertain work is you're reaching out to people. I don't know if they're going to get back to us. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. And and you get into this gray area of how much time should one person be committing to it over another.
Yeah, and I guess there's a difference between, there's a right way and wrong way if you're doing cold or somewhat cold. Maybe it's a lukewarm outreach if you kind of know them. The part that I'm referring to is these people who will harass in their send a cold DM. You don't answer them. The next day, they send a funny GIF or something like the old woman on the Titanic saying, still waiting, you know, like nudge, nudge, and you still there, winky, winky. And then when you answer them, it's this back and forth ping pong, you know, with this inane banter, small talk, which you know is leading up to a pitch. And then even when you say no, then it's still going on and on. And me, I just don't have time for it. I can appreciate people being in business or have to make a profit. They shoot their shot. I have more respect if someone just reaches out with, hey, here's what I want, Mark. Are you interested in this? And I can say yes or no, as opposed to the ones that will send something like, hey, I noticed you posted about the Maple Leafs on your Facebook there. Hope they can win. It's been a long time since 1967. Ha ha. So, you know, you're a big hockey fan, you know, going back and forth. It's like, oh, come on. And you're in your inbox constantly playing this ping pong. And there's actually a guru, I won't say who, he's a well-known name. I just read something from his recently that he said, send 100 messages every single day. And he said, then you send messages for 3 days immediately after, whether they respond or not. And then you keep at it. And he had a certain flow where you start by talking about, like I mentioned, something you see in there about their baby or about whatever, and then you lead up into the pitch. And I just think that's not a fun way for you as an entrepreneur or the receiver to go about it. I think there's better ways. The way I prefer to do it is to put all my effort into my messaging and my offer, get it in front of the right people, and then they're raising their hands. They're reaching out to me to book calls and to invest in my offers that way. And that's much better, because even if you could harass someone until they finally cave in and they purchase from you, they hire you, it's not going to be a fun experience in all likelihood.
I mean, I've been a recipient of that, not necessarily in the coaching space, but just in other areas. And it's really effective the first time that I see that message, because I was like, oh, this person is making a personal connection. It's once I see it the second time, the third time, the fourth time, and then I realize, oh, okay, everyone was just following this blueprint. Okay, now they're playing this game, and that connection that I thought was genuine is now dissolved because of the realization that they're following a strategy. So it's really about the difference between, like, I mean, all cars have engines, but they're also, they take different shapes, there's different colors, there's the appeal for different reasons. So it's the presentation is exceptionally important in making sure that it's personalized.
It's you, from running a show, will know with people reaching out to pitch to be on the show. It's I like to get back to people, but I can't, like, if I'm getting 10, 15 pitches a day, it's hard to be personalized. I have usually a templated response. And my show at the moment's booked up solid, but I send them to a couple other places. Like I have a Facebook group. There's almost 25,000 coaches in there. A lot of them have podcasts. So I say, here, join the group, and you can, post in one of the appropriate theme threads to see if you can get some guests that way. Or, by the way, I have a joint venture program. I guarantee spots for those partners. Here's the link. So you're flipping it around a little bit. That's the way I recommend doing it, is have things ready for when people are going to be pitching you, that you can flip it almost like wrestling. If someone's got you on the mat, you're flipping them around. Now you're selling them. And it's one of a couple things will happen. They'll either not respond because like, oh shoot, he's trying to sell me now. Or they'll be interested and they'll respond. And I've gotten business that way. I used to respond, not so much now, with whenever someone sends an icky message, cold DM, I'll say, hey, look, it doesn't look like a lot of fun. I don't know what kind of response you're getting here, results, but I have a better way to grow your coaching business. Here's more info. And then I send them over to wherever. And it's fun that way. Here's a tip for anyone. If someone's especially aggressive, one of my friends mentioned this recently, that with these bro marketers that are talking about, making $1 million in 5 minutes a day, working from your hot tub or whatever, she'll just say, what's your net worth? Like basically all politeness is out the window. So like, they've invaded my inbox and they're trying to nag me and trying to, twist my arm. Okay, what's your net worth? And she says she usually doesn't hear back from them. So there's a little tip you can use to brush them off.
I have a couple of things that I'd love to get your take on. So one of them is about the difference between not necessarily selling right away, but trying to build that trusted relationship first. So one of the things that I talked over with a different client in the media space specifically is, we are doing the cold emailing. We do want to start generating business in addition to referrals and our other means. And what I advised was, instead of like step one said, hey, do you want to make a podcast, or hey, do you want to make a YouTube series? It's, hey, what's wrong? Like, what are your issues? We'd love to provide insight and try to position ourselves as a trusted advisor first and focus on providing the value, rather than going immediately to selling them on the product. Have you found that there is a way to sensibly build that trust first and just focus on the advisory side of it first before trying to bring somebody into the product offer?
Yeah, a couple of things there. And it depends on the medium that you're talking about. So I'll give the example with email marketing, because I'm a huge fan of emails. I've been emailing my list daily now since 2016. And I actually go in the other camp, that what you're talking about is nurturing. And I'm not saying don't provide value, but I feel like a lot of coaches are afraid to sell. So they go into this nurture mode. And I've seen gurus give this advice, and I think it's wrong, where one of them, again, I saw recently, said you have to earn the right to sell to your marketplace. So you got to spend a couple months giving value. Then you can let them know you're in business. Here's how they can work with you. I've seen people in the email marketing space, they'll say once someone joins your email list, that you can't, for the first 50 days, don't make any offers. It's just all nurture. And I go the other way. So all my daily emails, day one, when someone joins my list, there's an invitation to invest in one of my programs, one of my products, get my help. So it's not like I'm doing just a sale. If you look at my emails, I like to start the email, give something of value. Maybe it's a nugget that I learned, something I read in a book, a small piece of advice. But then I go, oh, by the way, I go over this in greater detail in my ABC program. You can get the details here. So it's not a big, long-winded sales pitch, but I am making the invitation every single email that I'm doing. So I tend to go in the other camp, where you're like a business, a pharmacy. Someone comes in, they got a splitting headache. They want something for that headache. They don't want a brochure and being sent on the way. They want the medicine right now, right today. And I take that same approach.
I guess I can see how within the coaching space that going into nurture mode just seems like a default reaction, because there is a lot of nurturing to be done in the nature of the business, where somebody walks into a pharmacy. I like to use the mechanic's garage as a clear-cut example, because there's a very specific set of needs that have to be done so that the car can drive. So any particular examples come to mind, or even just like the pattern in aggregate of how to help people who are just like default nurturers how to maybe kind of like disconnect that a little bit so that they can focus more on the selling side?
Yeah, it's tough because you're right. With the coaching world, there seems to be an aversion to selling, and a lot of people coaches will say like, "Oh, that doesn't feel good to me. It wouldn't feel right, or
Yeah.
whatever." And there's a few things. It gets easier in time. And this, when I'm working with a new client, it's getting them into the habit of making the offer every day, and they get better usually after a while. And especially once you start making sales, start getting clients, start selling programs, you're going to feel much better about it. I always tell them to consider this, that if you don't sell them, they may purchase from someone else, work with someone else who isn't as good as you. So you're doing them a huge disservice because you're being skittish with selling. I had a guest on my podcast once, and he flipped his thinking because every day before he left the house, he was in a sales gig. Instead of saying, "Who am I going to sell today?" he was saying, "Who am I going to help today?" Which, it's only one word, but it's actually a big mindset shift there with it. So that's the way that I approach it. There's a lot of sharks in my space, and people that are just selling garbage, and they're just full of it. And I know they're full of it from hearing things and knowing people, but a lot of the people who are reading their stuff and seeing their stuff don't know it. And if they purchase that, they invest in it, they're wasting their money. I want them to work with me where they'll actually get something for it.
I want to shift into some questions that I have from one podcaster to another. So that's on deck. But what I can't help but ask, because I have my a periodic desire for drama, but like, what have been some of the red flags or some like the warning signs? There's ones that we've mentioned, but are there other ones that have stuck out where you realize, okay, this person is just like a facade of a legitimate person?
Well, I have a rule of thumb after 10 years, and I hope I don't get it. Maybe it's me being cynical and jaded. I
Sure.
assume everybody online is full of shit until they prove me wrong with it. So that may be a little bit too harsh or whatever. It's just I have seen a lot of people who are just full of it, the douchepreneur types. Red flags, that's a good question. I mean, these exaggerated promises, for one, and I hinted at this earlier. If somebody's promising you're going to make seven figures in the next month and you're only got to work a few minutes a day, use your common sense there. That's probably not going to happen. That would be one of them. Someone changes to the hot topic or hot trend of the day. Like, you see them going from Bitcoin stuff to AI next month to something else. They've gone through five things in the last half a year. That could be a hint that they're just chasing the hot trends and trying to squeeze out all the orange from the juice while they can with it. I would ask to speak with, if I'm looking to hire someone, often it's through referral. Someone I know has worked with them before, which is great. Then I get a good sense of how they are. But I always have my antenna up, and my spidey senses are finely tuned after 10 years of kind of seeing all this stuff. And unfortunately, most people have to be burnt once or twice before it sinks in, and then they'll know. And yeah, I'm going on like I'm the grizzled old veteran. I've only been in the space 9-10 years, but in internet years, that's like 40 years. So you cram a
Yeah.
lot in there.
It's just funny that you mentioned both Bitcoin and AI, because both of those things are things that have that I've been drawn to for different reasons. Because I do have some work in the Web3 space, and there's tens of thousands of different coins out there, and it's kind of the same problem as that with if you're looking in those space. You do have to separate what are the ones that actually are based off some sort of tangible value. Like a good example of this is the helium, where if you open up your network, you can help ease the burden of broadcast signals, and you earn helium tokens for it. So I don't know where it's going to go, but at least it's a way of like, okay, I'm contributing, I'm providing value, I'm receiving something in return. So there is some sort of tangible path. So that's just like an example of like,
And there's legit, I'm not saying
yeah,
everyone's
yeah.
full of it. Well, here's an example which shows how the space can be. You remember when Threads was a big thing back in July? Everyone was talking about, you got to join
Oh yeah,
Threads
yeah, I
and
remember
all that.
Threads. Yeah,
It was
take. We're
yeah.
gonna get Elon this time.
Yeah, so this shows where people online are like lemmings. I started to notice it one or couple posts or whatever, and then for those few days, everybody's posting about it. And it was all kind of silly because I saw a number of people posting, like, "Oh my gosh, it's so much fun to dunk on Elon over
Yeah.
there." Haha. I'm like, you want to spend 40, 60 hours a week just to insult Elon Musk? I don't think he gives a care, really. But I saw everyone rushing towards threads and people telling me, Mark, you gotta get on threads, gotta get on threads. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't see the value of it. I'm on too many platforms as is. And why would I be there? I'm on Twitter or X, now. And it was the same thing with Clubhouse back in early 2021.
Hmm.
Everyone's rushing that. Well, with these things, Clubhouse, but with threads just recently, within a week or so, people were coming out as threads experts, like learn how to earn six figures a month in threads. It's like it's 5 days old, and it just you would think it was parody if you didn't know. It wasn't satire. It was actual people out there with threads programs. The postscript to it, which I'm glad I didn't, is that threads died, lost 80% or 90% of its user base within a month, and it's dead over there. Same thing, Clubhouse is dead. Threads died even sooner, but they're both basically dead. And I just stay focused. I put my horse blinders on. I don't mind trying something new to see if I like it,
Hmm.
but I don't feel like I have to do it. I stay very firm on, okay, this is what's working for me, and it has to be something really good to add onto my plate because there's only so many hours of the day. And
Yeah.
it was really silly to see some people I consider really smart. They were like fanboys and fangirls gushing about it. And I see it every month. There's a flavor of the month. I saw it with Alex Hormozzi's webinar there a few weeks ago with all these people gushing about, oh my God, I got a hat from him that's going to change the world, and the nose strips and everything. And I'm thinking, yeah, I don't need a ball cap, I'm good with it. Book was okay, it was a decent book, but I don't think it was worth. He's a brilliant marketer, so kudos to him. But I don't think it was worthy the admiration and all these the
Hmm.
fanboys, fangirls, licking his boots for a week or 2 weeks.
Hmm. I think what I've observed, and I'm taking into consideration what you've mentioned about threads, is the difference between a new trend, or some at least starts as a trend and then finds its place in society. There has to be an underlying problem that has just not gotten solved. And so cryptocurrency is an attempt to find a way to create currency that is not tied to the government. I don't want to get any further into that. AI is a wide ranging topic, but it's about looking for ways to enable people that they haven't been able to do in the past. Me, from my creative background, I'm writing a novel right now because it's the only thing that I can do as a writer that I can finish on my own, because I do not have the capital for anything else. And I have tried. I've dumped a lot of money into making comics, and it's just, you gotta have an industry behind it. Whereas now, the fact that there's image generations, I have this whole new avenue to produce images. Would I love to work with an illustrator? Absolutely, 100%. I just can't afford them. So as a way to actually give me a leg up, this is why I'm drawn to it, because I've had this problem my whole life, and finally there's a solution to it. So whereas with threads, it was like, well, we already have like a lot of different communication platforms. People were drawn to it for emotional reasons because of the dislike of Elon Musk, who is definitely an icon, like 100%, like undisputed, good or bad, depending on your point of view. So or something like that, I think when people are truly drawn to it purely from an emotional state, and there's not a practical or pragmatic reason to integrate it, then it's going to fall off. And then of course you do get situations where just the tech wasn't quite there, and then something overtakes it. A good example of this was Vine, which I still reminisce about. My TikTok account is called Seth Missed Out on Vine, because like I had a BlackBerry Curve with 100 megabytes of data. I can
Yeah.
watch anything on it. It showed people that TikTok and these short form content platforms have power, and that it gives people the opportunity to do really good quality stuff, which is much easier to do when you're only dealing with a minute, rather than trying to do a really good quality 10 minutes or really good quality hour or something along those lines. So again, it solves a problem that a lot of people have had for a long time.
Yeah, I'm making an effort the older I get. I've for years been a huge reader, but I'm trying to make sure I'm spending more time with a book than screen time. So I'm on my platforms, I do my stuff, get my content out there, but I think that it's very dangerous to get sucked into all of
Hmm.
it. And it's kind of junk food for the brain to be doom scrolling, reading your Facebook news feed, especially we're going to see with the election next year in the US. It's just going to be like a dumpster fire. Twitter, all these other ones. And I just see entrepreneurs getting pulled in every which direction and stuff. And I learn a lot reading autobiographies of, and biographies of really smart, interesting people. And even if someone doesn't like Elon Musk, they could learn a ton from reading books about him.
Mhm.
I wasn't a huge fan of Obama. I don't think he's going to go down in history anywhere near the top U.S. presidents. But I read his book, his more recent one, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I enjoyed some parts of it. I can learn from it. And someone doesn't like Donald Trump, they could still learn from it. They don't like Hillary Clinton. So it's so polarized nowadays that people think, oh, well, I can't learn anything from this person. They're the Antichrist, and I hate
Mhm.
everything about them. Well, no, you could take some lessons, even if you don't like the person.
I appreciate that a lot too, and I agree with you in terms of Obama. I just wanted to stipulate that.
As Canadians,
My,
everybody would be shocked. Oh my God, a Canadian that doesn't like Obama. Okay, yeah, we're not all the same.
I rate them very highly in one regard, which is if you put nomics at the end of their last name, whose last name sounds really good.
It's awesome.
Obama nomics is
Obamanomics.
S tier. That sounds really good.
Maybe that's why Bidenomics isn't catching on, or could be because it's not working in practice. I don't know. One or the other, the name, or could be inflation, and everything else. But
There's no shortage of content that's answering that question on one side or another. So I appreciate delving into it briefly, but we'll switch gears. So I've been podcasting for quite a while, in the B2B space specifically over the last 3 years, and this is maybe like episode 20 that we've recorded, so this is all very green to me. But in the 20 episodes, I've still picked up a couple of themes. One theme, for instance, is the idea that when people come to a coach for a problem, the problem always starts on the conscious level, but almost without exception, there's some exceptions, but for the most part, it's an indicator of something going on deeper in the subconscious level or the unconscious level. And then the digging begins to try to understand and revitalize a person, almost reconstruct a person, whether that's in health or in business, public speaking. And it's a very fascinating theme, and it's the one that has stuck out the most to me. Now, I would love to get your take on that, but the question that I have for you is, have you identified themes in aggregate that maybe like came up at certain points throughout the time that you've been doing the show?
yeah, it's interesting. I've had, as of today, like 833, 834 episodes released, and it's a broad range of people. Some have been repeat guests for a handful and stuff like that. One thing I will find, which shocked me, is you assume, I shouldn't say shocked, but I was surprised. You assume when you see someone on a podcast that they got everything together and their life's been, magical and pretty much perfect throughout. And I can't get over how many guests, how vulnerable they were opening up during the show, but also after the show. Like I've had guests, say, have admitted to me, in several cases they were suicidal in the not like just back a few years before they hit their stride, and just all these things I wouldn't expected with it. And for me, that's more powerful than if someone comes in like life's perfect. Yeah, I make a ton of money, got a beautiful spouse, I run 10 miles every morning, I feel great, everything's happy. Well, that's kind of boring. So I really identify with the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, Star Wars, Harry Potter. Although I don't like Harry Potter movies, I just mean the hero's journey part of those, Lord of the Rings and so on. And I see it so much with my guests. It's funny how it could slot in there, the hero's journey with it. So and maybe now going forward, 2023, 2024, people are being more open and they don't feel like they have to present themselves like they're perfect, like everything's gone well. And maybe people are a little more forgiving too. They're willing to hire someone who's gone through that and gotten through those valleys and have come through the other side to help them get through their own challenges.
You know what I find interesting about that, having essentially been part of the generation raised on the internet. So I'm part of the millennial wave that for the first 10 years we didn't have internet. So we had our lived experience was based off the pre-established norms of Generation X and of boomers. And then the internet hits, and then everything changes. And what changed for me, especially, is that the things that I was naturally drawn to were available to me on the internet that were not available to me through school. Learning how to do Flash animation when I was a kid, and then later on getting into podcasting and web media. And I personally am more fearful of being vulnerable now than I was then, because the implications of what I say can be much more impactful in ways that I can't anticipate because information is more accessible. So the idea of like cancel culture, what was it? Kevin Hart, his tweets from like 10 years ago were dug up, and then he lost his ability to host the Oscars.
I
And
know,
then,
it's crazy.
and then Ricky Gervais says things much more abhorrent
Yeah.
as he's
Mhm.
hosting than anything that Kevin Hart had said in a tweet. And
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know if maybe there's just like a different worlds where if you're in one world where there is a hypersensitivity and there's almost like a need to attack anything that doesn't fall in line, and then there's other worlds where it's like, okay, all the people who didn't survive the first world can enter this one, and now we're actually in more reality where people are imperfect and are flawed and we're all trying to do our best. So
Mm.
that's my take on it. It's clearly not something that I had prepared to say, but that's just kind of like my point of view for like, I don't know. It gets to a point where I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna do it anyways. I'm just gonna say what I'm gonna
Yeah.
say because like, but at this point, there's way too much of my stuff out there that if someone wants to get me, they can get me anyway. So once I get past that fear point, it's just like, all right, come at me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I was speaking with a friend of mine, and she is someone you would assume would be very pro cancel culture because she's far left, loves Bernie Sanders, all this other stuff, and she admitted that her and her friends who are also in similar positions are now getting tired of it. And there's cancel culture on both sides because I think you see it on the right. Sorry, I won't get more into politics, but with brands, they're trying to cancel brands and stuff like that. Me, I'm more, hey, for free speech. If someone says something, I don't think Kevin Hart should be canceled for life, over a tweet. Especially a lot of times things are being done as jokes, and um, I don't know. I'm hopeful that as time goes on, now the pendulum's shifting, and I'm cross my fingers. I think it's starting to, because the people who used to wield cancel culture and thought they're in control are now being canceled, and they're realizing that it's kind of crazy, with it. So that's why I can appreciate what Elon's doing with X or with Twitter, because he's opened it up so it's not just one side echo chamber. I get what you're saying. I've just taken the approach between my show and shows I go on and my emails I write and stuff. I take the filter off because I want to say what I don't want to have boring stuff that's just designed to not offend. I would rather say things, and if someone doesn't resonate with me, they're going to unsubscribe from my list, or they're not going to be part of my world with it. And I have had people, not as much as I would think for emailing daily, but sometimes, like, I can remember a woman email back because I said crap in an email. I don't think crap's that bad. Not dropping F bombs and cursing like a sailor with them, but I said crap, and she said, Mark, I really enjoy your daily emails, but you said crap in one of them earlier this week. That doesn't match with me energetically or vibrationally. Can you clean up your language? I just said, hey, look, this is how I write. If it's not your thing, your cup of tea, then no harm, unsubscribe, and no hard feelings. So I would prefer, if you're policing your words and thinking about every single word because you're worried about being canceled or whatever, you're going to give yourself a nervous breakdown, heart attack.
I appreciate that. For my audience, like a lot of the reasons why I'm maybe avoidant of political issues is just because like it's not just about me on the program. My producer has her say in it, and so we're just want to make sure that like I'm not just turning this into an avenue to express my views on it. Your show is your baby. It's your creation from the ground up. So there's politics involved.
Feel free
Ironically,
to edit
politics
any
involved in.
parts if
Oh
I
no, no,
delve too
nothing.
far into politics.
It's all good. Nothing's been said that I feel needed to be edited out. But I would like to hear from my audience on this one. So if anybody feels like, yeah, you know what, feel free to get into a little bit more, or yeah, you know what, just stick to coaching. Just let us know. It's all about serving the audience. Along these lines, though, the premise is the same idea here. The idea of like two competing worlds. So in the one world, because I do spend, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes on TikTok. Some of it's informative, some of it is, a lot of it is not. But one of the common threads that I see is a lot of economic anxiety. A lot of people are saying they're not making rent and they're being forced to cut back. People are starting to get hungry. And frankly, being a Torontonian, I went through that myself. It got to a point where like, oh, man, I don't even want to work more because it's just going to go like $2,000 just to live. It's like, forget this. So I'm very relieved to be in the situation that I am now and actually feel a lot of my motivation is coming back. And then on the other side, across the e-commerce space and the Web3 space and here in the coaching space, but then also with a lot of other clients I work with, it seems like, and a lot of people are still doing pretty gosh darn good. And I'm just, again, I'm not expecting you to be the arbiter of truth on this. It's just curious to hear your point of view. But is it a matter of people just kind of needs to suck it up a little bit and realize, look, no, there is money to be made, but you have to do the work and provide the value? And what do you think are like the fair concerns that people should have, economically speaking?
Well, I get where people are coming from. It's hard not to if you go to the grocery store. Like I'm on the East Coast, it's a little different, market here for things versus Toronto. But still, when you look at things being double, triple the price as they were like 2 years ago, it's like what's going on? I used to go to the grocery store, and $100 back then would fill the cart. Now $100, you can just use a little basket, right? You get bananas, some eggs, a few other little knickknacks with it. And then I've seen some of the real estate stories. I follow some things in Toronto. Their sisters, apparently, the buildings built after 2018 in Toronto aren't rent controlled, and their rent was going up from 2,500 a month to 9,500 a month, which holy jeez, almost quadrupled. So I get where people are coming from with the economic anxiety. I think that's an argument for the online space, coaching, and other things, because you're not limited, entrepreneurship in general, but you're not limited making X number of dollars, working X number of hours per week. And that's where I think it gets tough. If someone's working at a job where they're limited, they're working 40 hours a week and they're making 60K a year, and those fluctuations are going to really hurt. They're not going to be getting any raises or very enough to keep up with all that. I try to flip it and say this is best time to be online and to be in business, because can you imagine what our parents, grandparents would have given to have a tool that could reach anyone out of 8 billion people for absolutely free, and to sell your wares? They would have blown them away. Back in the day, even when I started my real estate business back 20 some years ago, you had to invest in office space, expensive advertising, old school. Like I spent a ton on postcards, radio, print ads. You have to get all the office equipment, all this other stuff. And I look back to it now, you spend $10 on a GoDaddy domain, you got internet, you're good. And not saying it's easy, but it's an easy access. It's democratized access into entrepreneurship. So I try to turn into a positive and say, hey, this is why you should be online. You can outpace inflation because you can do really well with what you're doing, assuming you're charging what you should be charging, and you're not restricted in how much you can earn, which I think is great.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also important to understand too that a lot of the value in, say, an expensive world-class city like Toronto is inert. And by that I mean, yes, there's issues with inflation and with how corporations are configuring their profit margins, but property is not something that dissolves after 50 years. They give it 600 years and sure, but property is something that has innate value. So the idea of, oh, well, we all have to move out is a unsustainable system, because you're turning one family unit into 3 separate family units, all of whom can't combine their resources nearly as easily. So one positive thing that I'd seen over the course of, like, when I was in my 20s and dating was a much bigger priority than it is now, because I don't have to date, thank God for that, is people don't seem to mind so much if you live with your parents, because everyone realizes that, look, it's if you're doing fantastic and money really isn't an object for you, then by all means, the world is your oyster. But otherwise, it actually looks worse on you to be so insecure and be so adamant about status that you'll kill yourself just to kind of maintain that image.
Yeah, and I can back up what you're saying because I'm in the dating world now. So to stay out of these waters, it's not pretty. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm recording a podcast with a dating coach next week. So if you have any questions you'd like me to ask her, I'll do that for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're right about ego. There's difference between someone who's working, let's say, on their business, and they're still with their parents, but they're hustling, they're doing their thing, versus a man child who's never had a job, who's downstairs eating Cheetos and playing video games and masturbating all day. Right? Like there's two different things there with it. I can appreciate someone who makes sacrifices, especially if they're saving up to putting into their business with it. So I know some people in my world who have held on to jobs while they're building up their coaching business, and they're a little sheepish about it, like not wanting people to know and stuff. And I say that's great, because if you quit your job today, you tell your boss to F off and you just storm out of there. And great, you're a coach on day one, but you're suddenly going to be under the gun. You're like, oh man, I need clients like right away. And you're going to take on people you don't want to be working with. And you're probably going to be paid less than you could because you just need to get some money coming in. With my coaching business, at the time when I started, I was working with a telecommunications company here in New Brunswick. And I worked for about 11 months between when I started my coaching business, when I was ready to quit the sales job. It was a great sales gig. I worked from home. There's two of us for the province. We were selling fiber optic businesses and things. And I could work a couple hours a day, get my stuff done, and then work on my coaching. But then after just shy of a year, I said, okay, make enough from coaching now. Now I feel good enough to lose that safety net with it. So there's no harm in keeping your 9 to 5 while you're building up your business as well.
Just because we're closing in on the hour mark, and I know you got to run. One thing that's been like on my prefrontal cortex this entire time is you ever watch Community or Rick and Morty?
Love Rick and Morty. My son got me into that. He's 15 now. Community's been on my list because I'm rewatching The Office with my son, and of course you have like kind of a similar documentary style. And I've been wanting to because I see all the memes and everything. So no, yeah.
Well, just because you give off a lot of the same energy that Dan Harmon, the creator of both of those series, has. I feel like because and you like to hear about the hero's journey. Dan Harmon has a specific one called the story circle. It's a variation, it's like a modification of the hero's journey. It's a way that he incorporates it into it. But Community has a few episodes that are documentary, more for like, because they like to change up their format. Sometimes they do horror, sometimes they do action, sometimes they do documentary. But it is like a single camera sitcom. So just to, just kind of like,
yeah, I might be, maybe I was getting it mixed up with Parks and Recreation. That was it. Yeah, with it. So as long as you don't compare me, I guess, with Justin Roiland. He's in some, speaking of cancel culture stuff. But
no, that's good.
I love Rick and Morty. My son got me into it, and it's just such a smart show. Like, it really gets you thinking. It's funny as heck too, but it's also so smart. So it's coming back on for a new season. I think I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Yeah. For me, after like the 3 seasons, it's not that I didn't like the show any more or less, but anyways, I don't want to get into that because we're running out of time. But the final question that I always want to hear from the coaches is just like, at the level that you're at, what would you say are some of the challenges that you're looking to solve over the next 5 years? And these can be pretty specific things. So it's like, oh, I wish I was ranking a little bit better on Google, or I wish I got more reach. Like, what do you feel like are the things that you need to tackle?
Oh, I think for me, I'm an admitted workaholic, and I blame my real estate time. Bad habits were put in where I can feel guilty not working. So what I'm working really hard, ironically, working really hard on working less. With it, because I'm the type that if I'm watching, let's say I take your advice, I start watching Community, and it's 8, 9 o'clock at night, I'm watching it, I would think, you know what, I should have the laptop open and chip away at some stuff while I'm watching it. I can multitask. Yeah. So I have been getting better with that, but I still have some work to do, admittedly, because, and I've talked with a lot of entrepreneurs about this. The funny thing is, most people have to be motivated to turn off Netflix and go on the laptop, work on their business. Us entrepreneurs have to be convinced to shut the laptop down and go get on the couch and watch Netflix for a little bit to turn our brains off. So that would probably be it, is letting go and not feeling like I need to be working as much as I am.
As a gamer, I've always found a lot of zen that comes from listening to a podcast while I'm playing something like Diablo or World of Warcraft or something like that. It's always been one of my favorite things to do, because I'm getting over that insecurity of, oh, I'm not providing or I'm not doing something valuable. I'm listening to content, I'm learning, but I'm also clicking on monsters until they die. So I get a really nice balance of.
That's what I do when I have to clean the house or something that I'm moving around. I'll turn a podcast or an audio book on, and it alleviates the guilt because I'm learning and I feel like I'm moving the ball down the field as I'm doing laundry or doing the dishes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, dishes. Scott Adams and dishes became my nightly ritual for the last 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
With that, I know I got to get you going. So I just wanted to give you the floor one last chance in case there was any other like lingering points or reactions or observations that you've made as a result of this episode. Feel free to share them, and then otherwise share with the audience whereabouts they can go find you.
Yeah, so I mean, one main point I've noticed with people, especially aspiring coaches, when they're getting into the business, they think that they're going to be coaching 80%, 90% of the time, and then the other 10 or 20% of the time will be a little bit of marketing, a little bit of paperwork, catch up on things. It's flipped around. You're probably going to be spending 80% of the time finding the clients, and if you're coaching 20% of the time, that's pretty good. And I don't mean to throw a wet blanket on anything, but just so people are realistic that they don't think they can start coaching, slap a website up and people are going to come rushing in. You're going to have to spend a lot of time and effort marketing to get those people through the door. Then it gets easier after a few years. You're getting some more referrals and more testimonials, but in the early stages, it is flipped. So I like to mention that to people. And yeah, I mean, the best spot to hear more about me, check out stuff I'm doing, naturalborncoaches.com.
Fantastic. Well, that is everything that we've got for today. Marc, I certainly look forward to talking to you again down the line. I know you're a busy guy, and so any time that you can make for us is something that I truly value and treasure, and it does mean a lot to me to be able to be a part of this conversation, help get messages out there, and hopefully bring something unique to the table, even for people who have quite a few podcasts under their belt. So it's a challenge for me, but I do my best.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, this has been the Impactful Coaching Podcast. You can always email Joseph at impactfulcoachingpodcast.com. That's JOSEPH. The rest of it is spelled the way you expect. And it is our endeavor to make sure that in whatever way that you are helping others, that we want you to be impactful while you're at it.